Let's go live to the Prime Minister. He's speaking on a motion moved on anti-Semitism. It's been moved by Allegra Spender. Let's have a listen.
To this hateful prejudice. I said this on that day. I know I speak for every member of this House when I say that this kind of hateful prejudice has no place in Australia. The awful anti-Semitism chanted by some of the protesters at the Sydney Opera House is beyond offensive. It is a betrayal of our Australian values. We reject it and we condemn it. Our country is better than that, and our country is a better place because of our Jewish community. Our government is committed to keeping the community safe. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have not wavered. Anti-Semitism stands in vile opposition to all we are as a nation and all that we have built together over generations. It has no place in our nation, and will combat it with the full force of our laws and with total commitment from every level of government. Some of the horrendous acts have led to arrests. More will follow. We have a simple message to those cowards and criminals engaged in these low acts of hatred. You will be caught. You will be punished. Our government has no tolerance for your actions. That is why we introduced a landmark ban on the Nazi salute and hate symbols, the first ever, which came into effect in January last year. It's also why we criminalise doxing, legislation that some failed to support in this parliament just at the end of last year. Our groundbreaking legislation has made it easier for our law enforcement bodies to deal with the perpetrators of anti-Semitic acts, but it cannot be our only tool. Hatred feeds on ignorance, and ignorance thrives in darkness. So as we fight these crimes of bigotry in the present, we are building for a better future through the light of education and memory. Last week, as we marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day, my government committed $2 million for the upgrade of the Holocaust Institute for WA Education Centre, and we also announced $4.4 million for a National Centre for Holocaust Education here in Canberra. I want it to be part of the itinerary for visiting school groups every bit as much as Parliament House and Questacon and the National Museum are. The Holocaust was carried out on a scale that falls across the decades like a terrible shadow, and we cannot let its lessons recede into history. It's important we know what road hate can take people down. We saw hatred in the October 7 attacks. The same hatred fuelled the fire that devastated the Adass Israel synagogue in Melbourne, and the same hatred drove those who targeted a childcare centre in Maroubra. These acts of hatred are an assault on the rights of that every Australian cherishes. In addition to the laws we have passed, this government has made multiple commitments and investments to combat anti-Semitism. They include establishing Special Operation Avalite to respond to and investigate anti-Semitic attacks, $57 million investment to improve safety and security at Jewish schools and synagogues, an $8.5 million investment to upgrade the Sydney Jewish Museum, funding towards the replacement of the Torah scrolls housed in the Adass Israel synagogue, the appointment of a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism, Gillian Siegel, something that has existed for a while in other parts of the world, an agreement of National Cabinet to establish a national database to track anti-Semitic crime. In addition to that, Mr Deputy Speaker, we will continue to provide ASIO, the Australian Federal Police and all of the authorities every resource that they request or desire in order to be able to do their work. And we respect their work and give them support. We want to make sure that we have not just the words, as we repeat them, never again. We want to make sure that this is a reality, and we know that anti-Semitism has given dark shadows across generations. I say to Jewish Australians, live proudly, stand tall, you belong here, and Australia stands with you.
Hear, hear. Hear. Order. The question is the motion be agreed to, and I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the members for their contributions and acknowledge that this is a very significant time for our country. This is a time of national crisis, and it has been brewing away and been in the making for a long period of time. Anti-Semitism has always been there, as the previous speakers spoke of, that has previously been here for thousands of years. But in our country, the depth and the level of hatred and racism that we've seen has never been evidenced in our country's history. Speaking to Holocaust survivors who have come to our country at the end of the Second World War and have experienced peace and tranquility, have lived in an environment which has been conducive to them living safely but raising their children, contributing to civil society, being involved in philanthropic causes and contributing more generally to the betterment of this country. For the first time since 1945, they say that they feel unsafe in this country. There are people otherwise within the Jewish community that I've spoken to, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, but not just in Sydney and Melbourne, now across the rest of the country, who are talking about leaving our country. Leaving our country. People who were born here who know little of Israel and little of that life. They're talking about leaving our country and going to Israel because they feel safer there, a country that's under nuclear threat from Iran. This is the moment we find ourselves in. Now, it has been building since the horrible, dreadful circumstances of October 7, 2023. 2 days later, before any response from Israel, people were out chanting on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. The time was then for our country to take a very definite and strong stance against those actions. No such stance was taken. It then morphed into university campus demonstrations which went on for months and months. No red lines, no boundaries, targeting of people who were just going about their business, students, Jewish students that Josh spoke about before, academics on campus who were made to feel unwelcome in an environment which had previously preached inclusion and tolerance and forbearance. Members had their offices attacked and people were doxxed online, not because of anything they'd said or done, simply because of their surname or because of their heritage. And the fact is that this has continued unabated over the course of this period. The doxing then morphed into attacks by way of graffiti on people's places of business, their cars, and now their homes, now a firebombing of a synagogue, now the attack on a childcare centre. Funding has been ramped up to protect children with armed guards at Jewish schools.
Shame.
No other school in Australia has that sort of level of protection or overlay of security. We've now seen in Sydney an attempted terrorist attack, which on the advice of the police would have provided an attack not just on people of Jewish faith outside a synagogue, but many hundreds potentially of Australians with a 40-metre blast zone that would have been the most catastrophic terrorist attack in our country's history. So this has continued on for a long period of time, and it is no wonder that people within the Jewish community, their friends, their supporters, and every Australian of good endeavour and of big heart has been condemning of the inaction that we've seen over the course of the last 12 months. Now, I want to thank the member for Wentworth for bringing forward this motion. It is true, though, that we worked with the member for Wentworth and the government to see struck out the original words which were contained in paragraph 2, which read, after forms, comma, as we condemn all similar hatred directed to any groups in our community. Now, the member agreed to that form of words being struck out because we don't think that was necessary, and we also think it is inexplicable to try and mount the argument that this sort of hatred and this sort of racism and this sort of anti-Semitism is being conveyed against any other pocket of Australian community. We voted against the government's motion because it stopped us from moving amendments to the member's motion which would have strengthened the motion and provided stronger support to the community, and we'll continue to do that in further forms of this parliament. We stand with the Jewish community, we stand with every right-thinking Australian, and we condemn anti-Semitism in every form.